This is Unit 2, Lesson 3, equal and comparing thousands. So we'll talk about the decimal places, tenths, hundredths, and thousandths, and how we can represent them. So just equivalent decimals. Again, the word equivalent just means equal. You guys kind of know what decimals are at this point, right? Any number that has a decimal point in it. So we're going to look at some of these numbers and think about equivalent decimals. So for example, all these number lines here say the same thing. They're just written a little bit differently. So if we look at this first one, it says 1/10. This next number that they've added on also says 1/10. Adding a 0 at the end here does nothing to change the number. Adding 2 zeros to the end does nothing to change the number. Now my expectation is you don't have those extra zeros unless you're adding them to compare fraction or compare decimals. Otherwise, they're just kind of a waste of space. You could add as many as you want. Let's look at the 6/10 column. See, they've added 3 decimals down here. This still says, when I read this number, I would say 6/10. I wouldn't say anything else. So unless you're dealing with money, where you want the double decimal places, right, because we use pennies and dimes, or you're trying to find equivalent decimals or fractions that match up to decimals, you really shouldn't have those extra. I like this very top way the best. This is kind of the simplest form of those decimals, so that's what I would expect to see in here. Okay, so just some things that I want you to think about for decimals. If you want to go ahead and pause this, I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but there's just some thoughts and ideas about thinking about equivalent decimals and how those work. You should be prepared to talk about that in class, what that 0 on the end does or how that works. So make sure you're ready to discuss. Okay, so we've got these numbers, and we're just going to talk about greater than, less than. Remember our lovely little alligator head? The open part goes to largest number, and the small part, which is the smallest portion of his mouth, goes to the smallest number, right? It just makes sense. Largest number goes to the bigger part of the symbol, smallest number goes to the small part. Okay, so 17 is greater than 9, right? We can all agree on that. But when we look at 17 hundredths and 9/10ths, the 9 is actually bigger because the 9 in the tenths place value is bigger than the 1 in the tenths place value, okay? So 73 is less than 138, right? 138 is greater. But 73 hundredths is greater than 113 thousandths because the 7 in the tenths place value is greater than the 1 in the tenths place value. So we look at that tenths place value. It's just like comparing whole numbers. You look at each individual place value. So 456 is greater than 8, but 8/10ths is greater than 456 because when I look in that tenths place value, right, an 8 is more than a 4. So I look to that place value. Okay, so let's practice some more. When I look at these, I've got 6 hundredths, sorry, 6 thousandths, and 6/10ths. Well, 6/10ths is greater because a 6 in the tenths place value is more than a 0, right? 6/10ths or 6 hundredths, well, 6/10ths. Again, that 0 on the end doesn't matter. I look at my place value, compare equal place values, right? So I would compare 0 and 0. Nope. 6 and 0. Oh, 6 is greater. So 6/10ths is greater than 6 hundredths. Okay. All of these are equal. They all say 6/10ths. They've just added extra zeros. Remember, extra zeros mean nothing. Same here. These are equal because if we look at their place value, we've got 0, 0, 0, 0, 6, 6, equal. Okay? Okay, so let's write each amount as a decimal number. 9/10ths, right? You're going to put a decimal and the 9. 9/10ths. 52 thousandths, right? We're going to put a decimal. And because it's the thousandths, I need my last digit to end up in the thousandths. But that's 3 places over, so I have to put a 0 here. Okay, so it's the decimal point, 0, 5, 2. 8 hundredths. Well, there's no tenths, so a 0 in my tenths spot, an 8 in my hundredths spot. 3 cents, right? If you had 3 cents, you would have 3 pennies. Well, 3 pennies written like money would look like this. Okay, 65 hundredths, decimal, and a 65. 548 thousandths. I can't tell you enough. If you guys say these out loud and say them correctly, you'll see the decimal place or hear it, and it'll make better sense. So 58 hundredths. 12 thousandths. Okay, so I need a 0 because I don't have enough numbers. And that 2 has to end up in the place value that I say. So it has to end up in the thousandths place value. 7 hundredths. Again, I need a 0. There's no tenths. And my 7 has to end up in my hundredths place value. 4 thousandths. Well, I need a 0 in my tenths. I need a 0 in my hundredths. And the 4 has to end up in my thousandths place value. Okay, we're going to circle the value that's not equivalent to the other value. So let's look at 10. 47 hundredths. 47 hundredths, 407 thousandths, 47 hundredths. Well, it's this one, right? It doesn't look the same. So another way to compare those is look 5 tenths, right? 5 tenths, that says the same thing. So I'm comparing. This one says 5 tenths, right? When as a fraction. Oh, look at this one. This one has a 0 in the tenths. This one is not like the others. One of these things is not like the others, not like the others, right? Let's start comparing again. What I notice visually when I look at these is that they all have a 1 in the hundredths place value, excepting this one, which tells me that this one is not like the others, right? Okay, I've got a 7 in the tenths place value, so I'm looking to make sure I've got a 7 in the tenths place value, no 7 in the tenths place value, 7 in the tenths. That means it's this one. Alrighty. You guys are kind of getting the hang of this, hopefully. So 39 hundredths, 39 hundredths. Oh, 39 thousandths. Not you. 4 hundredths, 4 tenths, 4 hundredths, 4 hundredths. Ah, it's that 4 tenths. Okay? So you guys are kind of getting the hang of it. Really, when we look at comparing with greater than or less than, we just go by place value. So the thing I like to do first is I like to look at my same place value. So I'm going to look at my tenths place value. I'm going to underline it, right? It's the 3 and the 8. Well, 3 or 8, which one's bigger? 8. Then my little mouth goes that way, right? 36 hundredths is less than 8 tenths. Again, I'm going to look at my tenths place value. 4 and 6. 6 is greater. 9 and 9. Okay, they're the same, so I have to go on to the next one. 1 and 5. So I go to my hundredths place value. The 5 is greater, so that means 95 hundredths is greater. Okay, this one, 4 and 4, it's the same, but then there's nothing else to compare. You can add that placeholder 0 on if you need to, so now I compare 5 and 0, and then I know that 5 is bigger. Okay, so then my greater than sign goes that way. So add those in if you need to. So like when we look at this next one on number 20, we've got 836 thousandths versus 83 hundredths. Again, I'm going to compare 8 and 8. Those are the same. 3 and 3. Those are the same. Now I've got a 6, and I've got nothing to compare it to. Well, that nothing to compare it to is a 0. So that makes that 836 thousandths greater. 2 versus 3. 3 is greater. Okay. 6, 6. Oh, same. 2 versus 1. 2 is greater. Greater than goes that way. Okay. 7 is greater than 0, so I'm looking at my tenths place value there. 4 is greater than 0. I'm looking at my hundredths place value because my tenths place value is the same. So greater that direction. All right. A store had the same amount of 5 fabrics. The chart shows how much of each fabric is left. Use the chart to answer questions. Which fabric did the store sell the most of? We're going to pick the one that has the least left, right? The least left is the one they sold the most of. So black, because they have the least left. Does that make sense, guys? If they have the least amount left, the most is gone. Okay, the store sold the least of which fabric? Well, which one do they have the most of left? Yellow. So if they sold the least of it, they would have the most of it left. It would be the biggest decimal number, and that's this one right here. The same amount of which fabrics are left. Which ones say the same thing? Well, white and red have the same information written down, right? They both have 51 hundredths of a yard left, white and red. Okay? All right, so thinking about place value and comparing decimals.